All right, now I want to switch gears. I want to talk to you about climate change. And there's a book that has just come out by John L. Casey. I read this book, and I watched the documentary. It was on Newsmax TV over a week ago. I watched it twice. And the things that he is saying in this book are absolutely incredible. And in fact, I've been praying. I said, Lord, I said, what's coming? Well, how is this all going to unfold? I know it's coming. I don't know when, but I said, what should I be looking for? And then I saw this book, and I heard about John Casey and the work he was doing. Now, for years, I have been telling people that when it comes to climate change, and we're going to look at some quotes here from the book, that climate change is the biggest hoax that has been perpetrated on the world. Now, climate change is real. It is really happening. Everybody notice how cool it's been this spring? All right? But the question is what's causing it? That's where the problem is. Climate change is taking place, but it is not man-caused. I don't believe that what man is doing is ultimately the controlling factor. And I have been telling people for years, and I've been pointing to the work of other scientists, from the web and all that, that it's the sun. It's that big bright thing in the sky that gives you a sunburn. I think that has something to do with our weather, don't you? And so John Casey did not set out to challenge climate change, and specifically that it is man-caused and CO2. In fact, the data that I have read and looked at is that the records show that CO2 levels are an after event, not a causative event, to global temperature rise. In other words, what we see in the geological record is that as the temperature rises, CO2 levels rise. Why? Because as it gets warmer, vegetation becomes more active, animal life proliferates, and therefore you have more CO2 being produced as a result of that. And that's in fact there's anywhere from a 10 to a 100-year lag that you see the temperatures rise and then CO2 rises. So the point of it is from science that is out there and the work that they have done, you could find this out. And so the temperatures have been fluctuating, and we've had some very warm times, but now that has changed, right? So I want to take you through this because what I've done is I said, okay, how does this fit in with Bible prophecy? And I think what I'm going to show you, you may find very intriguing. But it is getting colder, and the point that we're going to make here that Mr. Casey makes is that it's because of the sun is going into hibernation. And he talks in his book about a 206-year cycle that the sun goes through. There are many cycles in climate, and some of them are thousands of years long, but it doesn't do us any good to study those. But the 200-year or 100-year cycle, now those we can use to be a tool if in fact there is something to it. And so he's noticed a 206-year cycle roughly. It varies from 201 to 210 years, but roughly a 206-year cycle in the sun. He was researching and studying the sun and its potential effects on the planet to humans with coronal mass ejections and things like that, and wondering about what the potential was for the future, when he came across some scientific data, and as he correlated that data, and he correlated it with temperature changes on the Earth and sunspot activity on the sun, and he found almost a 100% correlation. Now in science, when you see close to a 100% correlation, it's like there's something to this. And so as the temperatures got colder, he noticed that the sunspot activity was lower. And he went back and he looked at what's called the Dalton minimum, the Maunder minimum. And the Dalton minimum was back from 1793 all the way to 1830. And you can look at the charts for the records for that time, and you find during that time period, indeed, we had colder temperatures and we were at very little sunspot activity on the sun. And even in the Maunder minimum, the mini ice age, 1645 to 1714, that was a 70-year period. They called it the mini ice age. And so the question right now is that scientists are wondering that we're into our minimum. The sun is going in hibernation right now. It started in 2010, all right? And it became official in 2010. And we're going to show you some different evidence here with that. I'm going to show you some quotes from the book, what he says. An historic reduction in energy output of the sun has begun. The most likely outcome from the solar hibernation will be widespread global loss of life and social, economic, and political disruption. You must begin to prepare for this life-altering event now. He's not a Christian. He's not a believer in the apocalypse. He's trying to do scientific work, and he's telling the world something's coming and you need to prepare. Now, here's what he goes on to say. The theory of man-made global warming and climate change based on human greenhouse gas emissions is the greatest international scientific fraud ever perpetrated on the world's citizens. And I agree with that. Now, as you think about this, it's like, well, why? The world leaders know there's climate change taking place, but if the sun is causing it, how do you tax people for that? So you can't make any money on that. So you get along with the environmental movement that people attach this to it, and they believe that climate change is real, but it's the cause. And governments are defrauding the people with all these carbon taxes and everything else. In fact, he makes the point in his book that once he released this information, and once the facts were out there, he says it correlated with the fact that it went from global warming to climate change all of a sudden. And he also noticed that with the stock market, they were selling carbon credits on the stock exchange, and they were selling carbon credits for $7.40 a ton. After all this information came out, those carbon credits went to 10 cents a ton. Because people realize the planet is cooling. There's no need for me to invest in these carbon credits. He goes on to say that the bicentennial solar cycle of 206 years correlated with the near 100% accuracy to every cold temperature period over the last 1,200 years. Based upon my calculations, I discovered that the next cycle change was imminent, and because of that record cold it would bring, I quickly realized this would mean a rough, perhaps dangerous period for many of Earth's inhabitants. This linking of solar cycles to Earth's temperature could, with this prediction of the next climate change being a potential dangerous cold era, was the crucial finding. This was the wow that struck me at 2 p.m., April 26, 2007. It all came together in that instant. So that's when it happened, and that's when he started putting together his press releases, and he informed the White House and many other people of this. Of course, it was summarily dismissed and opposed. So he goes on to say in the introduction, page 21, given what we now know, there is only one reliable approach to climate change prediction, that which is based primarily on the sun's activity, influenced by the other planets of the solar system and their combined effect on the Earth-Moon system. We should not be surprised to see record-setting catastrophic volcanic eruptions and earthquakes take place in the next 2 decades, if not sooner. In fact, research shows with a high degree of certainty they are coming. Have you been watching the news? All right? There's a correlation to this. Right? I'm going to show you some charts. Okay, how did I get back there? Okay. During the last 2 decades, the world's citizens have been subjected to flood of media reports about global warming, along with the current U.S. government and UN officials pushing the corrupted AGW, that's man-centered theory of global warming. There has been an intensive international campaign aimed at convincing us of a threat of ever-increasing global temperatures from human-caused global warming. It is, in retrospect, a great historical contradiction that over the same period of time, there has been no global warming. None. None of the predictions that the global warming people have made have come true. They're zero. Every prediction he has made based upon what he calls relative cycles, that based upon the cycles of the sun, he can relate it almost 100% to the cycles of the weather on the earth, the rise in temperature and the fall. And he has made predictions, and every one of those predictions have been true. Who should you believe? Right? So, don't let the facts get in your way. Right? This past is clear about the effect of the solar cycles upon the Earth's climate. For those who do not wish to be condemned to repeat the past, we must remember a critical lesson from the last time the solar hibernation struck. Had he known of his time, Napoleon Bonaparte's reign and history of the world could be quite different. And what is that lesson? It's always hottest before the cold. That when the Dalton minimum took place, that right before the minimum and the drop in temperatures, it got warm, it got hot. It was a spike. We've seen the exact same thing. We've seen a spike in the temperatures, and in 2006, 2007, and then right after that, boom. The solar cycles have dropped, and now we're into a declining cold period for the Earth. That was on page 32. Quote, I think the signs are abundant and crystal clear. While we are in desperate need of a national preparedness strategy to deal with the next climate change, we would be hopelessly and unrealistically hoping for that. Optimistic to expect that one will be developed. Remember Hurricane Katrina and its aftermath in New Orleans? There will be no U.S. president, no UN panel of experts, no congressional leaders standing up at any time soon touting the need for an international conference to identify the goals and standards to address the next cold era. Will we be left stranded, waving our hands from the metaphoric rooftops? In other words, for the world has invested so heavily in global warming man-caused that they will never acknowledge this. But they know something is coming, and they are preparing for it. All right? And we're going to see how this factors in. Now, this is a chart. This is a scientific chart. They use many charts. They don't use just one. But in this chart, from 1600 to 2000, it shows the Maunder minimum. We can see that here. And the Dalton minimum. And we can see that this is a low sunspot activity. Each one of these spikes represents an 11-year cycle. The sun goes through an 11-year cycle. And what the scientists watch, they watch the number of sunspots. And then as it reaches a peak, and usually on the 5th to 6th year, it reaches its peak, and then it usually starts declining after that. And they know when the solar maximum has taken place based upon the amount of cycles in that 11-year period. They can vary a little bit, all right, but that's basically what scientists watch. Now, in this particular chart, what we see is that they were particularly watching what's called 4' cycle, that in 1793, it's like, okay, when did the cold start? It was in this, what they call the 4' cycle, the fourth cycle, and it was there that the temperatures started dramatically falling, and that's when the Dalton minimum officially started in 1793, all right? And so what you can see from this chart is that it peaked and then it dropped, and the exact same thing is happening now. In this particular chart, we see the same thing. This is the solar cycles and the progression and how the magnetic field of the Earth is affected as well. There's a correlation between the magnetic fields of the Earth and the sunspot activity. That could be the connection with the volcanoes and the earthquakes taking place right now, that a change in the magnetic fields is causing these earthquakes to rupture and the magma to flow to the surface. And what we're going to see in history has been a correlation to that. All right? Now, in this chart, what we do is we see we're in right now the 24 cycle of the sun, the cycle 24. That's what they do. They've numbered them. There's a time they started numbering, and this is number 24. They had predicted basically with this, as they were looking ahead at the end of cycle 23, they were predicting based upon what had happened before. NASA, NOAA, and others were making a prediction. And the prediction basically was that 24 would be another strong one, averaging 145 sunspots, which would make it about average, and the temperatures would be maintained as far as the weather was concerned. But, so this is where they thought it was going, and what they discovered was actually 2 spikes. And the second spike, which came, was actually bigger than the second, which was unusual. So it told them that something dramatic was coming. In fact, as the data began to come in and over the period of the cycle, they found out that it actually peaked at 81, which is a significant drop, which indicated that the sun indeed was now in a down cycle and going into hibernation. But what was interesting in the prediction of this, that even though NASA and others were predicting that this would be a normal cycle, and it's not, they predicted that the next one would be a low cycle. So they're predicting a decline in the sun going into hibernation. They were 11 years off, right, in this particular thing. Now, there was a conference. I actually went on the website for NASA looking at the predictions here, the solar cycle, and right in this you can see that they mentioned that solar cycle 24 had peaked out at 81.9 in April of 2014. And they go on here also to say that we are currently over 6 years in the cycle 24. The current predicted and observed cycle makes this the smallest sunspot cycle since cycle 14, which had a maximum of 64.2 in February of 1906. So on the NASA website, one of the main, Dr. David Hathaway, who is at the very heart of this and following this, says we are indeed in a minimum cycle in the sun, contrary to what they predicted. Now this is actually taken from the NASA website, and what this shows the different cycles. And there's a couple things I want to point out in here. First of all, notice that the cycles are definitely trending downward. Here we are here. These were the cycles beforehand. This is talking about sunspot activity. And each one of these cycles represents 11 years, roughly. Now, and the yellow lines down here are that 11-year period. And you notice there's a bit more of a gap in between these two, because this one was actually delayed, which I find interesting. And this blue line represents where we're at right now, and we can see we're definitely on the downward trend. And we're going to have less and less sunspot activity, which means, folks, your heating bills are going to be higher. Which means that the planting seasons are going to be shorter, especially the further north you go. And what they're saying is this is going to happen for the next 30 years. If it's a Dalton minimum. If it's a Maunder minimum, it can be much deeper and much longer. And so the trend is definitely downward. In 2007, officially the warming cycle ended. And 2007 was the year it switched from global warming to climate change. Isn't that interesting? All right? Because they couldn't deny the data. Now, see the gap here between these cycles? And look at the gap between this one. It's much bigger. And what's interesting is that the start of cycle 24 seemed to be delayed for 3 years. And it was unusual, but it shows a dramatic shift that we're entering something different with the sun. The solar max took place on April 2014, and Doug Becker from NOAA mentioned this, and on April 2014, the solar cycle 24, it peaked, and it gets the maximum. And this was, he said this on before April 13, 17, they had a meeting. I forget where the meeting was taking place, but this is just fresh out the presses. In addition, we will discuss why we can confidently state that we are all downhill from here and what we can expect in the next few years. So, one of the leading scientists, and this was from the Space Weather Workshop, and the meeting of the Science and Research Applications, Operations, and Users, April 13th, 17th, in Boulder, Colorado, which just took place. All right, this was right from the presentations. So here it is. This is where we're at right now, and you can see this is a projection of where it's going. And so the question is, how low will it go? Will it be a Maunder, a Dalton minimum, or will it be a Maunder minimum? No one knows for sure. There are some scientists, Russian scientists, climatologists, all right, and that are predicting a Maunder minimum and not a Dalton minimum, which is much more severe. But either way, it's heading down. Now, research by SSRC, which is a research firm of John L. Casey that's put together with scientists, shows that historically large volcanic eruptions and earthquakes are more likely to take place during solar hibernation. I believe major earthquakes and volcanic eruptions should be expected and planned for by all nations, especially those in geologically active zones, that has cyclical histories with harmonics of 100, 200, 300, 400 years. In other words, what he's saying is that if you have a volcano next door to you that erupts 100, 200, 300 in a 100-year cycle, you better pay attention to it because it seems like it's coordinated with these minimum solar cycles. This is a chart which shows, all right, the correlation between the drops in temperature, the Ming Dynasty, North Chinese, 1876. Here's the Dalton minimum, here's the Maunder minimum, here's the Spoyer minimum, here's the Wolf minimum, the Mongol invasions, all these things took place, and the records are showing solar cycles were down, the temperatures were down in every one of them. That's too much of a correlation to ignore. Columbia reports, now I'm going to show you some news flashes. Columbia reports, welcome to the tropics of Bogota, covered in 24 inches of snow. All right? Now this happened last year. Bogota is 4 degrees north of the equator. For every degree is 60 miles. That's 240 miles north of the equator. They had 24 inches of snow. All right? I have pictures. Right? One storm. Excuse me. So here's Bogota, Colombia, and this is, all right, this is where the equator is. If that wasn't bad enough, a month earlier, and also there was 3 feet of snow and hail in Quito, Ecuador, which is right on the equator. They had 3 feet. People have never seen anything like this. Now, do you think that climate change is real? You better believe it's real. But what's causing it? It's the sun. That's causing it. All right? And the low sunspot activity. Mexico Columbia volcano sends exhalations 2 miles in the air. This is March 28, 2015. March 30th, Indonesia's Sinabung volcano has been rumbling for 2 years. Right? Very important. I'll show you why in a minute. These are where the volcanic activity, Costa Rica, Colombia, and in Chile. It's also the places where we see all that weather as well. This was that volcano that just went off twice. It creates its own weather. This is the one in Colombia that they're watching. It erupts with no warning after 42 years. This is another one, I forget which one. This is the one in Colombia that's become active also. This was April 23rd. So this is all just recent. This is the one in Costa Rica that is going off right now. All right. Early morning earthquakes produced more than 70 aftershocks. This was April 1st. So this was a precursor to the volcano going off in Costa Rica. In Chile, this is going on talking about what happened that the dust and ash reached 9 miles into the air. And they got up the next day, it was a blanket of fog and it hadn't cleared. We had a layer of smoke above us. And that a third and even more aggressive explosion is likely. So these people are enduring this right now. And this just may be a precursor. Prior to that, on March 31st, they had the worst floods they've ever had in 80 years. All right? And on top of this, a 6.1 magnitude earthquake in British Columbia, off the coast there. Now we see the 7.18 magnitude earthquake that rattles Nepal just yesterday. In the epicenter there, and over 2,500 people reported and killed. The devastation is unbelievable. Dust storms are killing, and epidemic suicides are taking place in places near Rwanda and in Africa and in northern part of Africa. Hundreds of farmers are committing suicides because their crops have been devastated. So these are real people who are enduring these things. Is the number of volcanic eruptions worldwide increasing? Yes. During the 20th century, there was a total of 3,542 volcanic eruptions. That works out to approximately 35 eruptions a year. That may sound like a lot, but according to Volcano Discovery, there are 36 volcanoes erupting around the world right now. So something is definitely going on. And John Casey has warned and has saw a correlation between volcanic activity and sunspot activity. I'm going to go forward here. The deadly eruption of Mount Tabor in Indonesia sparked what was known as the year without a summer. That was in 1815. Stop a minute. 1793, the Dalton minimum, this is right in the midst of that took place. That eruption, it was like, I believe they said it was like 1,000 nuclear bombs going off at once. So here we have the chart, the Maunder minimum, the Dalton minimum, and now where we're at right now. What do we see? We see in 1793, right, it's like 1830, the eruption of that volcano in 1850, which changed the weather of the world, which gave the world a summer, a year without a summer, okay, the cold weather. Laki, the volcano in Iceland, went off in 1783, all right, at that time. That was just 10 years before the official start of the Dalton minimum. In 1883, we see another drop in temperature, Krakatoa, east of Java. That went off in Indonesia. That's why the Indonesia volcano is very interesting right now. And during the Dalton minimum, it was the mini ice age. There was also some volcanoes that had preceded that, and a lot of earthquake activity. In fact, 1893, the Madrid fault during the Dalton minimum gave way. 3 8.0 earthquakes took place at that time. So what John Casey is saying is that we see a correlation between the cold temperatures, increase in earthquake activity and volcanic activity, and aren't we seeing the same thing? We are. And so the sun is a major cause of that. Now, I said all that to say this. Now, you've seen this already. What does the Bible warn about? It says that I'll show wonders in the heaven above. The blood-red moons and everything else that is taking place. Signs in the earth beneath, blood and fire and vapor and smoke. That's earthquake and volcanic activity. The idea of mixing blood with earthquake and volcanic activity is that people are dying. Are people dying? Yes. God's trying to warn us. This is what's coming. This could all be a precursor in conjunction with everything else. And I've been telling people, I believe the blood-red moons are God's warning that this is coming. Because he says in this passage, I'll send signs and wonders in heaven. And he said, I will send signs in the earth. We're seeing both of them. And so this indeed may be coming upon us. And that's what I believe is pointing to the sixth seal. Now, the blood-red moons, plus all the volcanic activity, is telling us that this is indeed be upon us. Luke tells us that there will be signs in the sun and the moon in Luke chapter 21, verse 25. He tells us that the sea waves be roaring and men's hearts failing for fear for looking after those things which are coming upon the earth. If you lived in Chile, would you be fearful? If you lived in any of these places that where these things are, if you lived in Nepal, would you be fearful? What's going on? Is it really CO2 that's causing all this? No. One volcano will put more CO2 in the air than all that we can do in more than a year. Mount Pinatubo, when it erupted, back in the 70s, I believe it was, changed the weather for that whole year. Joel 1:2 says, blow the trumpet in Zion, sound the alarm, because the day of the Lord cometh. It's a day at hand, it's a day of darkness and gloominess and a day of clouds and thick darkness. One of the things they're worried about this volcano in Chile is that it's sending so much dust and debris in the air that it's going to affect the weather. And in fact, that's exactly what it's doing. So, what I then began to think is like, wait a minute here. As we look at all of this, and as we look at the battle of Gog and Magog, it says that God is going to cause these nations of the north to come down into Israel. And so I began to think, if I know this, Russia knows this. And if you're in Russia, who is already dependent upon a lot of wheat coming in, and they know that their northern sections and their fields are going to be useless, they're going to move south. That's what Crimea and Kiev and all this is about. And so I believe that the hooks in the jaw may be that as we look back at the Maunder minimum and as we look back at the Dalton minimum, the population of the world was a lot smaller. We got, what, 17 billion people now? We barely produce enough food right now to feed the world's population. Can you imagine if something like this took place in the northern Canada, northern parts of the United States? What's happening in California with the droughts? we're seeing famine in the future. And that famine, people will do strange things. That could be, in fact, what will cause the nations of the north to move into the land of Israel. Now, here's what I've done. If this is true, then this area that I have marked off here in red, the two red lines, is going to be the only area that's not going to be significantly affected as far as agriculture is concerned. Where does the United States fit into that? Well, you can see most of it, except for Florida, parts of Texas and all of Mexico, will not be adversely affected as far as the growing is concerned. So is that what's going to cause Russia to want to move down into the land of Israel? So, in fact, is it Europe and the kings of the East that as their people are starving, the one place they can go is that area, and Israel is the land bridge that sits between these continents and Africa. And so all the turmoil and the things that are going on right now is that there are people, nations, that they know what's coming. And so basically what we see then is that right now we have our borders open. We're letting the people from the south come out. Why? Because maybe our leaders know that coming in the future, we're going to want to move south. So we need a one world order. We need to abolish borders because people are going to be on the move. And so they're not. So they're deliberately looking the other way because they know what's coming. And they're worried about how to feed people. And that's why they're trying to take your guns away from you, because you won't be able to protect yourself. They don't want you to be able to protect yourself. They know what's coming. And so this area is going to be rather warm, will be relatively warmer, where the northern and southern hemispheres are going to be a lot colder. If what John Casey and other scientists say is coming, and how all this could fit in with what the Bible prophesies about moving against Israel and moving against the nations in the Middle East. And it's just a scenario that you also see that this divides the world into a third, and that we look at the first trumpet judgments, that it's on a third of the world. And maybe that third of the world is that middle section there where all the people are now crowding into to try to survive the long, cold winters and for the agriculture and control of the land. And that's what's being, all these wars that are being fought for control of that land. And that's going to be prime harvest land. You know, if we go into this cold era, and it's intriguing to me how all this factors in, and you see the angels of the first, second, third, and fourth trumpets talking about how a third of the trees, a third of the grass, a third of the animals, and so forth are burned up, a third of the ships and all that. And it's interesting that as you divide this up, that you can divide the world up into thirds based upon what's coming with the climate. So, it says, this is back in the Psalms 83, so that finishes my presentation. That's one of the things I wanted to share with you. Ultimately, to sum it up then, is that, as we go back to this chart, is that global warming, number one, man-caused global warming is a hoax. How many here already knew that? Yeah, you knew that, right? It's a hoax. The data just simply isn't there. Climate change is real, though. It's happening. It is cooler. Our winters have been getting longer. We've been getting more snow, the snow has been staying. And based upon this research, if indeed this does continue, and the scientists expect it to, because the cycles have repeated themselves every 206 years, it's going to get colder. That's not good news. And on top of everything else happening, this is not good news, is it? With the economies being stretched and everything else, the last thing I need, the last thing you need is a greater expense of heating a facility or heating a home. But folks, we need to get the word out. Now, whether or not the Lord is coming back soon or not, nobody knows. But this is coming, regardless. And so, as Christians, we need to have our understanding in place so we understand these things and we're able to speak to it. So we can say, okay, we need to trust in the Lord. Why? Because God's people are not found making bread. I believe God will provide, and that we as Christians need to be ready. But this is going to be part of the trials and times in which we live. And people have survived this before, but they prepared for it. And some of the things that Mr. Casey says in his book is get yourself some food, learn how to plant, and learn how to protect that. Because if this is coming, the price of food is going to go high, and it's going to be scarce, and we're already seeing those things happening in the world. It's real. And it's just another piece of the puzzle. And so the sun may be the mechanics, how God's word is literally fulfilled in relationship to what brings the armies of the north down into the land of Israel. All right? Guys?
A couple points. What's interesting in Revelation, during the opening of the first 5 seals, you'll see that a loaf of bread could cost up to a day's wage. Could you see that happening here? Could you? I could. The other thing is, too, if global warming is really happening, why aren't we having more hurricanes? Think about that. The water would be warmer. If global warming was real, we would be having more hurricanes. This is the easiest hurricane season we've ever had. Why? Because the water temperature is cooler. Thirdly, John Casey's an engineer who helped design the space shuttle. People get on him and say, "Oh, you don't have a PhD in climatology," and he says, "But either does Al Gore." It's funny that we will believe a man who, quote unquote, invented the internet. He has no credibility behind him, Al Gore, to say the things he's saying. And he's making a lot of money doing what he's doing. He's got motive. John Casey's giving his book away. His motive is not money. His motive is just, as our motive is truth, and trying to relay that truth. And again, he may not have a degree in that area, but he's a scientist, very intelligent man. And last point is this: if you want real reports on climate change, get it from a Russian climatologist. Because over here they're stifled. Anybody, scientist, climatologist, says, "Come out with John Casey," within a week they've lost their job. The Russians, behind the Iron Curtain, believe it or not, they have more freedom than we do in that area, and they give true reports. They truly do. They have no agenda, and as Pastor John said, they know what's coming. Why are they going after the Ukraine and Crimea? They need their wheat. They know that. They know something's coming. And we're blind if we pretend and stick our head in the sand and pretend it's not. God is giving us signs in the heavens, and it's up to us to heed those signs and be prepared. John Casey himself says, get a year's worth of food put away. Understand this cold snap. John Casey's not saying it's an ice age. He said we won't know for 5 years exactly how bad it'll be, but get a year's worth of food put away. And like he said, you can have a good year in this where crops aren't so bad, but have it for the times when it's lean, just as God gave Joseph the vision to do when he was in Egypt.
The peak of this is projected to be for the year 2030. All right, that'll be the low point that they're projecting. So we have time, you have time to watch this, but you need to watch this. And you need to be aware of this. Don't panic or anything else, and be praying. Be praying, Lord, deliver us. Provide for us. We need to trust in the Lord. And so, Brother Wayne?
Well, I think the whole idea is being prepared. Preparation is what you need to do. And if you're not prepared, obviously you're not ready for what's going to take place. So the Lord says that we need to do that. We need to prepare not only for His coming, but we also need to prepare for the time that we have here, however lengthy time we have, or how short it is. So if we do that, I think we're doing what God told us to do.
Jesus said, when you see all these things, look up because your salvation is drawing nigh. All right? There's always hope. In the midst of all, there's always the hope. And so we're not fear-mongering. We're just trying to present the reality. We believe that the Scriptures, the prophecies are there. Christ told us to watch. If there was nothing to watch for, why command us to watch? And so, as a watchman on the wall, that's what we are. We're putting the word out to the church and to the world that the day of the Lord may be soon upon us. No man knows the day or the hour, but we are in the season of His coming. And I think you'd be a fool to just stick your head in the sand and ignore all this. First question is are you saved? You know the Lord Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. And if you know the Lord Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, you're prepared for whatever may come. All right? And in a spiritual way. But in a physical way, we need to be good stewards of what God has given us and prepare and be wise stewards of what God has given us. And if we're prepared, that means that we don't have to worry about someone else taking care of us, and we'll be free to take care of someone else. And so I think as Christians, we need to bond together. We need to be wise concerning the things that are happening. But there is a prophecy also in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. It says that they love not the truth. And God sent them a strong delusion because they loved not the truth. And they were all deceived. And they didn't believe the truth. But God wanted them to believe the truth because He wanted to save them. But that's what global warming is. That's just one of them. It's that they've invested into a lie. And as a result of that, they're deluded. And they'll look at this and they'll reject it and say, because it doesn't fit their paradigm. That's really sad because this is true. This is what's really going on.